Thank you for taking your seats. Good morning, everyone. I am very impressed with everyone's social skills at this hour. Thank you, everyone. Love it. Welcome, welcome. I am Sarah Reynolds-Lasser. Let's go back one. Got a little excited. I'm the VP of Business Development for ACRA. Thank you all so much for being here today. I'm excited to welcome you all into the room for Business Over Breakfast, a little reimagined gathering from our previous events, giving you a good update on issues affecting business and our membership here in Aspen. So thanks for joining us. We have invoked the Uller god of snow in the past at our events, inspiring some snow and snowfall, and I think we can all say he did a really great job and turned out for us last week. A big thanks to everyone in the community who helps keep us going, right? The skiing company, the streets team, everyone helping to make business continue and make this the best place to live and work. I hope everyone was able to get out and make some turns, hopefully not just through the S-curves, but out there on the hill as well. Unfortunately, the flu gods have visited Debbie and her family, so she can't be here today. She asked me to remind everyone to stay safe and healthy, and of course, wash your hands. We are going to do a little bit of interactive engagement with you this morning with a platform called Slido. There are some QR codes on your table. If you would go ahead and scan those so you can bring up the platform on your phone. We'd love to have a little bit of direct interaction with you this morning. Go ahead and scan that QR code. It should come up automatically. And first off, maybe some comments on the skiing. How would you describe the ski condition this past week? Someone said biblical earlier. Hopefully all good. All right, get those QR codes scanned. See what you think of that storm, and hopefully our answers will be coming up on the screen as we speak. All right. Epic, lovely, beast. Amazing. All right, so a little test run. So glad to hear the positive feedback, and great to hear that so many people were able to get out and enjoy. All right, now let us turn to a little bit of business matters for the membership. We are excited to revel in the excitement of ski season, but do need to review some business matters. Per our bylaws, the 2025 budget must be approved by the membership. This budget is carefully developed by the ACRA staff and an independent bookkeeper. It's thoroughly reviewed by the Finance Committee and the Executive Committee, and it was approved by the Board of Directors on November 26. Can I get a motion to pass the budget for 2025? Thank you. Can I get a second? Thank you. All in favor? Thank you very much. This is a great time of year to thank our annual sponsors here at our first event, member event. Thank you to the Aspen Art Fair, Justice for Migrant Women, and Community Banks of Colorado for your support of both our ACRA members and our programming. I also want to remind you about our many chamber member benefits that ACRA offers. Some of these that you see are very tangible for you to take advantage of immediately. It's also a good reminder this time of year to review your business directory listing, and you can do so and make edits and requests for changes through the member portal. We have partnered with Local, which provides a complimentary service to manage your Google business profile. We have also partnered with Destination Uplift. We are actually sponsoring the program to have access to marketing webinars and an on-demand library of marketing tools and resources for you to utilize for your business. And we are also partnering with the City of Aspen and the Green Business Network of Colorado. This is an opportunity for your business to be recognized for excellence in sustainable operations, equity, and resource management. Any business who signs up will be provided free technical assistance, and you will be able to improve your efficiency and reach your sustainability goals. So important to be reminded about your member benefits. These are available on our website as well as throughout our member newsletters, which we send out monthly. We, of course, have the election coming up on March 4th. We have several candidates here in the room, as well as representatives from the referenda. If you'd like to stand up, give a little wave to our ACRA membership, please. Give them an opportunity to meet you. Thank you all so much for being here. I know ballots have arrived in mailboxes. I've received mine. Please take the opportunity to introduce yourself to these candidates and representatives after the program and share about your needs so they can really hear directly from our businesses and our members on the needs that need to be represented. We also want to remind you that we have interviewed these candidates and these referenda representatives through our Aspen Affairs show on GrassRoots. Thank you to GrassRoots for being here today as well. And you can find these linked from our website at aspenchamber.org/elections, as well as through our social channels. So a great opportunity to hear directly from our Debbie Braun and these interviews that she did with each of these candidates and representatives. So thank you again for everyone joining us today. I'll now introduce our first speaker, Dr. Elizabeth Ramey. She is actually going to be joining us over Zoom. So a little tech-savvy ACRA member event. We're learning to pivot. I felt like it was more of a cyclone the past couple days, but that's all right. So let's get Dr. Ramey with us on Zoom, and I will introduce her. Good morning, Dr. Ramey. Can you hear us okay? Great. Welcome. Dr. Ramey is a principal economist and demographic analyst for the non-partisan Legislative Counsel staff. She specializes in labor markets, income tax, and TABOR, as well as legislative impacts on demographic disparities. Prior to joining the Legislative Counsel staff in 2019, Dr. Ramey was associate professor of economics at Hobart and William Smith Colleges and a consultant for the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development in Geneva, Switzerland. Welcome, Dr. Ramey.
Hi, Dr. Ramey. Go ahead and I think we can hear you now.
Okay, I can't see the slides. Did I do something, or did that happen on your end? Oh, wait, okay.
Okay, we can hear you. Go ahead and start your presentation.
Okay. And can you see the slides?
No, you need to share your screen.
I did.
There you go. Now we can. Great.
Now can you see the slides?
Sure can. Go ahead and put that in presenter view.
It was all set up and then it changed right when she introduced me. I'm sorry about that.
All right, we're good to go.
Okay, how about now? Yes, looks
Yes.
good to me. So I'm sorry about that, and I'm happy to be here to present to you, and I'm sorry that I wasn't able to make it in person. And as you heard from Sarah, I am principal economist for Legislative Counsel staff, and so what that means, I am one of a team of 5 economists, and our job is to monitor the Colorado and national economies in order to be able to inform the legislature about their potential revenue streams and spending. And so what I have prepared for you today is our economic outlook that informed our forecast in December. And I have updated the data whenever new information was available. So I'll just go over sort of the big picture, a very high level discussion about economic activity, and then the labor market, and then inflation, and then there should be time for you to ask specific questions if you feel like you want to. So just to start here with the big picture, this is showing us what's happening with gross domestic product over the last several years. So this is spending from consumers, business investment spending, export spending from foreign consumers, and also government expenditures. With consumer spending being the largest component of gross domestic product. Economic growth in 2024 really confounded expectations for a slowdown and came in at 2.8%. And so over the last 2 years, we have seen growth rates consistent with a moderate economic expansion. And you can see there that our forecast in December expected that expansion to continue, but at a slowing rate. In December, our overall picture was one of a predictable path of a soft landing in response to tight monetary policy. So we were expecting falling inflation, cooling labor markets, and declining interest rates. So I have to say that since our December forecast, that picture has become a lot fuzzier and impacting our perspective on inflation, on monetary policy, and particularly on federal policy, and with heightened risks to the economic outlook, coming both on the inflation side and also on the potential for unemployment to increase. So just to say, we have not seen those risks materialize, but I would say that those risks have clouded the horizon more than they were in December. Okay, so first for unemployment rates, here you can see the trajectory of unemployment rates in the US and Colorado. I will say that unemployment rates do remain relatively low compared to historical standards, but they have continued to tick up. This has been in line with expectations of a slowing economy in a tight monetary policy environment with elevated interest rates. Also, some of the increase in unemployment rates has been because of new people or returning people coming back to the labor force. And so that tends to boost the unemployment rate as those people look for jobs, but it's not necessarily a sign that the economy is bad. It's actually the opposite. People are feeling more optimistic and coming back to the labor force. Colorado does usually outperform the nation on unemployment rates, but as you can see, it fell behind in December, and it has also been slipping down in the ranks of states and now has the 15th highest unemployment rate among the states. We are expecting the unemployment rate to continue to increase slowly throughout the forecast period, in line with, again, expectations in a tight monetary policy environment. And here we have just a look at jobs performance by different sectors in the economy. In Colorado, Colorado has added almost 50,000 jobs over the past year, and that translates into a 1.6% growth rate. And as you can see there, our job gains have been led by government, and within government, that's mostly state and local government employment that's still recovering from losses during the pandemic. Also, we have significant gains in education and health services, professional and business services, and trade, transportation, and utilities. These are the 4 biggest sectors in Colorado in terms of employment, so this is good news that they have been performing well over the past year. We are still seeing some sectors that are struggling, either shedding jobs or struggling to add them, and as you can see at the bottom of the chart, that includes the information sector, financial activities, particularly real estate, mining and logging, which has been shedding jobs or struggling for quite some time, and then manufacturing, which has also been sluggish in recent months and quarters. And a lot of these sectors are more exposed to higher interest rates than others, and so this is most likely an impact of the monetary policy and the higher interest rates in the last couple of years. Here we see some good news, and Colorado's labor force participation rate is among the highest in the nation, and down from the post-pandemic high, but it's really been pretty stable, well above the national level at about 68% since the pandemic disrupted the labor force. And Colorado consistently ranks highest in the top 5, usually among states in terms of labor force participation rates. You can see here that some of the long-term shifts in labor force participation rate in terms of declining since around 2009. And some of the short-term disruptions with the Great Recession and then the pandemic kind of disrupting those long-term shifts. But this has to do with the structure, the age structure of the state population. And we do expect that to impact labor, the growth of the labor force and therefore employment in the next several years. And so we expect employment growth to continue, but to decelerate in 2025 and 2026. And that's going to reflect a slowing economy as well as these demographic shifts, which I'll show you on the next slide. So we do have long-term headwinds that from an aging population that's going to challenge Colorado's labor force. On the left-hand side, you can see the age structure and gender structure of the population as it was in 2020 and then as it's expected to be in 2030. You can see that it's becoming more top-heavy and with particular growth in the population ages 75 and over. And on the right-hand side, you can see the prime age population as the share of the whole population. It has been leveling off, but there has been still an increase in the share of older Coloradans for that workforce to support. Another challenge to workforce and growth and the growth of jobs, therefore, and employment in Colorado is slowing population growth. The state's population growth has slowed significantly, as you can see there, and since around 2015, with a recent uptick last year, however, still expected to decline. Over on the right-hand side, you can see the things that contribute to population growth in the state. On the top right-hand side, natural increase, that's births minus deaths, and that has been trending down for quite some time as the population ages, so we have higher death rates and combined with lower birth rates. And so a long-term decline, a slight uptick last year, but we do not expect that to continue. So really the population growth and employment growth relies on net migration into the state. And as you can see on the bottom right hand of the screen, that net migration has really slowed quite significantly in the past 3 years to some of the lowest rates that we've seen in 20 years. Okay, so next slide, on to inflation. U.S. inflation, you can see here the trajectory of both U.S. and Colorado inflation. U.S. inflation has been more persistent than inflation in Colorado, which really fell pretty dramatically in 2024 for most of the year. But both of those rates have started to tick up since September of 2024, and that really coincides with when the Federal Reserve started to cut interest rates. So you can see there that price increases have really moderated from their peak, but they do remain above the Federal Reserve's target rate of 2%. And just to say, price increases have moderated, but prices are still increasing. So in most cases, not decreasing. So for us, it might not feel like much of a relief because prices are still rising. We still remember what prices were like in 2021. And so it takes some time for households to adjust to these new price levels and to adjust their expectations of prices. And so we are seeing still consumers quite concerned about inflation, even as the inflation rate has fallen. So we do expect inflation in Colorado to continue to be lower than it is for the nation and to fall from the 2.4% that we saw in 2024 towards the 2% target in the forecast period, so in the next couple of years. This slide gives you an idea of some of the things that have been contributing to inflationary pressures in the state and how those pressures have shifted over time. So one of the pieces of good news here is that housing has been a main driver of inflation in both the US and Colorado. And in recent months, that component has really dropped off in Colorado. And in January, you can see in the chart, you can't see the dark green line, dark green bar, the housing component did not contribute at all to inflation in Colorado in January, while it is still contributing significantly to the US rate of inflation. The housing component moves slowly because of the way that it's measured, so we do expect the housing component to continue to contribute to lower inflation rates in the state than in the US, and that will offset some of the increases that we're seeing in the last few months in the transportation component. As you can see in the gold bars there, we've got some pressures there in the transportation component, likely related to gas prices and car insurance and some price increases that we're seeing in rental cars. Oops, sorry. Okay. So in terms of monetary policy, I like to show the long-term trajectory of interest rates just so that we know. We feel like we're in a high interest rate environment right now, but compared to historical standards, we really aren't. But in any case, the Federal Reserve did start lowering interest rates in September of last year and cut rates a couple more times by the end of 2024. And at the time, we were seeing cooling inflation, slowing labor markets, and that was paving the way to monetary policy easing. And that was after 2 years of monetary policy tightening that started in early 2022. But like I said, recent inflation data has shifted our expectations of that monetary policy environment, which we had anticipated rate cuts to extend into 2026. But now, with several months of data indicating firming inflationary pressures, and with some anticipated federal policy shifts that might also contribute to inflation, such as the potential tariffs and tax rate cuts, we anticipate that further rate cuts are less likely and that the Fed will probably pause rate cutting and just see what's happening with inflation in the next few months. Okay, finally, just to give you kind of another long-term perspective, this is showing you the relationship between construction of new houses and changes in the population living in those houses in the state over the past several years. As you can see, housing unit construction and changes in the household population don't always go together. There are different forces driving each of those. Housing units coming online declined during the Great Recession and recovered slowly since then. But the household population continued to increase during that time period. So now that we're building new units more, the new household population coming in is lower. So in 2023, for example, we had about 34,000 net increase in population and 45,000 new housing units. So this could be a good sign. It could mean that we are catching up after a long period of under constructing of new homes in Colorado. And I did check out the chart for the northern region, which includes Pitkin County, and there's a similar pattern there with the housing population, the household population trending down since 2015 and even declining in the past couple of years, while construction has continued to ramp up slowly over that time period. So we see a similar pattern at the regional level for Pitkin County. Okay, finally, just to end with a note on risks to the forecast, which in December, like I said, we had anticipated kind of a predictable path for the economy of slowdown associated with tighter monetary policy and a soft landing. with risks to the upside and downside equally probable, but with downside risks potentially more disruptive. And I would say that has not changed, with downside risks being more disruptive. I would say that there is an elevated risk associated with federal policy changes. But those changes have largely yet to be materialized, or if they have, they haven't shown up in the data yet. So while we do have more risk, I assume, to the forecast that we're preparing now for March, we still haven't seen the impact of those federal policy changes materialize as of yet. So with that said, I will ask if there are any questions.
Hold on.
I think it's hard to take the state info and apply it to our little place. Brent from Kenichi. I'd say it's hard to take some of the state info and apply it to our little bubble here. And is there any resources that do a little bit of that, or that insight of what happens here versus what happens Colorado and U.S.?
Thank you for that question. You are right. You're correct. It is difficult to find reliable data on a regional level, especially in a lower population region like the mountain communities. So I did mention, I did look at some of the state demographer's office data on household population and housing construction. The state demographer's office website is a really good resource for mapping and seeing population changes and things like that. So I would recommend looking at that on the regional level, or they have it also at the county level, so you can look at just Pitkin County as well. I know the inflation information that we have, we don't have information on prices throughout the state, and we call it state inflation, but it's actually Denver, Aurora, Lakewood, which I forgot to mention as I was talking, but I do know that that is a limitation of that data. We don't have price data that captures what's happening for you and your experience, unfortunately. Some of the labor market data at the Department of Labor website is also available at the regional level, so you could also have a look at that information. We also have housing permits available. I think that's also available at a regional level. So if you wanted to email me and follow up with any specific questions, I'd be happy to look at regional level data in order to answer that question.
Any other questions from the room? Yes. Hold on. Savannah's going to bring the mic.
With unemployment such a big concern in Colorado, and so many government jobs being a driving force of the growth in jobs in Colorado, are some of these government cuts going to hit the state particularly hard?
Thank you for that question. That is a really good question. And yes, I think federal changes in federal employment and jobs and is one of the sources of increased risk in the forecast. So federal jobs actually account for about 2% of total employment in the state, but I know that doesn't capture the reliance on federal employment actually, because there are other private sector jobs that also rely on those jobs as well. As I know, for example, park service jobs in Pitkin County are a driver of leisure and hospitality employment elsewhere in the economy. So that 2% number doesn't actually capture the true impact on the state. And like I said, we have yet to see how those numbers will manifest in the statewide employment numbers, but I do expect that it will have some sort of impact on at least short-term unemployment rates in the state.
Great, thank you. Dr. Ramey, thank you so much for joining us today. Appreciate you coming over Zoom, and thank you so much for sharing that state economic forecast. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. And just anyone feel free to email me if you have questions. I'm happy to answer them.
Great, thank you. All right, now I will welcome up Dan Bartholomew, Executive Director of the Aspen-Picken County Airport, and Bill Tomsich, Managing Partner of Air Planners, to give us an update on Aspen-Picken County Airport.
Thanks a lot, Sarah. I just want to start off with three brief slides here. We don't have a whole lot of time, and we've got a lot of information to share. But I first wanted to just present a brief overview on the commercial air service that we're enjoying right now. And I'm not sure if the slides are advancing okay. I'll just give it another moment here. And also, while I'm waiting for the slide to come up, I want to take this opportunity to thank everybody who supported the ballot initiatives in November. I know this business community played a huge role towards that end, and while the future of our airport faced a lot of uncertainty coming into that ballot initiative, now we have a lot more certainty in front of us. And I'm going to share some of the developments here that we can now be proud of. First of all, talking about the state of our winter air service, we now have 3 airlines flying into Aspen year-round with 9 nonstop routes during the winter. And I should point out that during the summer months, we have 8 of those 9 routes continuing to operate, every single one of them except Phoenix. And then, very importantly, the fact that Delta is now flying in here year-round, connecting their hubs of Atlanta and Los Angeles. Of course, we also have American from DFW year-round, and United connecting Denver and Chicago through the spring months coming up. So we really are going to be connected to 5 of the world's largest airline hubs on a year-round basis, and 9 cities nonstop during the winter, 8 during the summer. I've been asked by Sarah to speak briefly on the current and likely possible future aircraft at Aspen. And first of all, I've got to acknowledge the CRJ 700 because it's been flying here reliably since 2006. It has been an incredible aircraft for this airport, and it's going to continue to fly here for some time, at least for American and Delta. But we also just saw the recent introduction of the Embraer E175 that's now been flying in here since the 3rd of December. I've got another slide. I'm going to go into a little more detail on that particular aircraft because it's going to play a major role here for this airport moving forward. And then there are several new aircraft on the horizon that will be allowed to operate here in the future as a result of the runway improvements that are now slated to happen within the next couple of years. And one thing they all have in common is they're powered by new generation engines by Pratt & Whitney, the geared turbofan engines. One of them is the Airbus A220. That's actually flown by Delta. It's very popular already out of Salt Lake City, and it's been flying out of there for over 5 years now. There's a stretched version of the A220 called the Dash 300, which is flown by Flybreeze, along with Air Canada. Delta has a few. JetBlue also operates some of those here in North America. That technically would be allowed to operate at this airport, although the jury is out as to whether or not this 130-passenger aircraft would really have the performance to do so. And then finally, I point out the Embraer E2, which is another next-generation aircraft that would have the performance to operate at the Aspen Airport, also powered by these GTF engines. Right now, there are no U.S. operators of this aircraft type, but they are operated in Canada by Porter Airways, and it's actually a magnificent aircraft that has great performance. And the one thing that all 3 of these aircraft have in common is how incredibly quiet they are. But that said, we've got the Embraer E175 now flying. It's been, the inaugural flight was on December 3rd. I wanted to assure this group that this is probably the most extensively studied aircraft through a ton of flight engineering work to ever be introduced into the Aspen Airport. There have now been more than 400 arrivals and departures since December 3rd, and we now have, as of this past weekend, a total of 8 uniquely modified Embraer E175s that are uniquely qualified to fly into the Aspen airport. 4 of these are brand new deliveries from Embraer that have taken place within the past 5 weeks, and then 4 are 10-year-old aircraft that have received new engine modifications. And actually, that was as of this past weekend. As of yesterday, a 5th has been introduced, so we now have a total of 9 aircraft that are unique to be able to fly into Aspen. I'm told these aircraft have been flying better than expected. In fact, the operational limitations out of Aspen are far less than they are out of the Eagle County Airport. And United is so confident that this aircraft is going to be the future for us that as of last Thursday, they actually upgraded the aircraft to E-175s from both LA and San Francisco. So now all 10 daily flights between Denver and Aspen are with the E-175, and 2 of the 3 each from LA and San Francisco are with this new aircraft. And after the airport closes for reconstruction, which I'm going to turn it over to Dan to talk about here in a moment, 100% of all United Express aircraft will be with the E-175. We also know that there's been some uncertainty about how long the CRJ-700s would continue to fly in here. We now know that United's final flight of the CRJ-700 is going to be their nonstop to Chicago at 12:55 p.m. on May 4th of this year. So that ends months and months of debate about that. I do expect American and Delta to continue to fly the CRJ-700 for some time, but they're going to be watching very closely the success that United has seen with the E-175. Meanwhile, I'm going to turn it over to Dan to talk about the airfield pavement maintenance plans.
Okay. Thank you, Bill. Good morning. As you may become more and more aware that May is becoming the de facto lipstick on a pig for the airport, as we move forward, we will be closed this year for about a month, May 5th through June 1st for runway maintenance, pretty much. Our runway is aged. It has some subsurface issues going on right now. In order to maintain it and keep it safe, we have to shut down for a month. We will be open in the morning of the shutdown to allow aircraft to come in the night before to get people out of here, and then reciprocally we'll be opening up in the evening of the closure to allow aircraft to get in to get people out the next day. Really what we're looking at this year is just some targeted mill and overlay. We're fixing some cracks. We're going to do some crack fill, some slurry seal, replace the markings back after we do that, and then we'll add some baling wire, chewing gum, and zip ties to it after that, just to kind of keep it going until we can actually do a full depth replacement of that runway, hopefully in 2027, and I'll talk about that a little bit here. We're also doing some additional work, as Bill mentioned. E-175 is operating at the airport. Those aircraft do not fit into our conventional parking positions at the airport. So in the past, we've converted 4 parking positions for the E-175. These parking positions can operate with both the CRJ and the E-175 at the same time. We're converting 2 additional spots this spring during the closure so that we can anticipate additional E-175 aircraft coming in. That'll leave 2 remaining spots for just the CRJ only. And then as time progresses, if the remainder of the airlines convert their entire fleets, we'll convert those spots as well. So as far as the overall airport modernization program goes, I'll kind of walk you through the next steps and some of our anticipated timelines for when this may transpire. Right now, we've completed the airport master plan, the visioning process. We went through an airport layout plan update, which is required by the Federal Aviation Administration to acquire any grant funding for an airport anything that's grant funded for the airport. Okay, we're complete with that. Right now we're going through the environmental approval process. We did an environmental assessment completed with a finding of no significant impact in 2018. Those have a lifespan of about 5 years, so we've passed that. Now we're having to do a supplemental environmental, which we anticipate to be completed roughly 4th quarter of this year, and then we can move into design and construction, et cetera. We will be looking at funding options for the airport for both the terminal and the runway. Most of the runway we anticipate will be federally funded through grants, a little bit of a local match. And the terminal will be a combination of bonds, federal grants, state grants, some other things that go into that. We will then get into design, construction, and then commissioning and ribbon cutting and all that fun stuff. So to give you a little update on where we are with the existing process right now, as I mentioned, we're going through an environmental assessment supplemental. Okay, this is sort of just recalibrating the existing environmental work that was already done. We're not anticipating any changes to the environmental. It's just there's been some updated modeling that the Federal Environmental Protection Agency is using now for the NEPA process, and we're just kind of running through that. Okay, we anticipate the entire process, which we're in the middle of right now, is about 10 months. Then schedule. And this is kind of where the rubber hits the road for the airport a little bit. As I mentioned, right now we're in the environmental review process, the top one there in green. Q4 of this year, we should be complete with that. And I'll get into a caveat on that in a minute. Financial considerations, we've already started looking at different funding opportunities. This will cover soup to nuts with funding, and the next slide will show that. We plan to have a terminal and runway request for qualifications for engineering, architectural services, et cetera, out next week or the week after. So we're really moving forward with this. As we get into this, we'll get into design, we'll get into the construction, and then various projects will open. We anticipate the runway. We're going to commence the runway with 2026. We won't be shutting anything down. But what we anticipate is stockpiling materials, things such as that, so we can hit the ground running in the absolute spring, March-ish of 2027, and we'll probably be closed right through Halloween, okay? We're hoping to knock this out in one season. Otherwise, we're looking at 2 subsequent closures, 2 summers plus shutdown. So if we can knock this out in one summer, that just helps everyone out. Then we'll move into terminal, and we anticipate the terminal commissioning sometime in 2029. Terminals take a little longer to design, a little longer to construct. They're vertical work as opposed to flat work, so it'll take a little bit longer. Okay. The one issue with the NEPA process that I know there's been some questions about what's happening with the federal government and some of the process, how this may impact us. I see 2 things there that could impact us. One that's sort of obvious is the funding issue. You know, if funding gets cut, we may not be able to move into some of these projects as quickly as we were hoping. The one thing that I see could be sort of a delay for us, if you will, is the NEPA process, the environmental process. If something shifts with how NEPA is applied, there may be some court rulings in that. And usually when you get into court rulings with NEPA, everything pauses. So we're anticipating Q4 of this year. If something happens and it has to work its way up through the court system, we may see a pause in NEPA, and that could push the runway out, that could push the terminal out. Okay, that's the main concern I see right now. As far as funding goes, there's definitely an alphabet soup of different fundings. We love our acronyms in the aviation field. AIP is Airport Improvement Program. Those are federal grants. That we anticipate will pay for most of the runway. Bill funding, the bipartisan infrastructure law, which has one more year of it, possibly, right now. We were looking at that to fund the terminal. We don't think we're going to meet that deadline now, okay? So we'll look at other options for the terminal, such as things more in the brown category there, bonding, debt service, airport funds. We're stuffing dollars in a little mattress in our airport operations center right now, so we're holding on to funding for this, but then there are other funding sources as we move forward. So we're looking at all of these as possible funding sources for all of these projects. We're looking somewhere about $500 million at the end of the day on this, okay? One of the biggest issues we're gonna run into on this one is where do we put people that are gonna come up? We're talking hundreds of workers that are gonna be working on both these projects, the terminal and the runway. Where are we gonna house them? Those types of things. So there is a number of moving parts. This becomes one big shell game at the end of the day for us. But we're working through all those issues right now. Okay. And with that, we're happy to answer any questions you might have.
Given the closure extends over a holiday weekend, which it hasn't in the past, have there been any discussions with Rifle to accommodate extra GA traffic, or with Eagle or Grand Junction, or to add any commercial flights to ensure we have capacity over that weekend?
So no direct discussions with those facilities. That's all done kind of behind the scenes through Bill. No, with the airlines. So those will sort of migrate to Eagle or Grand Junction or Denver at that point, just naturally. As far as the GA traffic, yes, that'll hit Rifle, that'll hit Eagle to an extent, yes.
And actually, the short answer to your question, Jeff, is yes. The airlines have planned for the closure this May in anticipation of next year as well in 2026 and a full summer closure in 27. But United has actually upgraded one of their aircraft between Denver and Eagle to a mainline Boeing 737, which they've never done before because of the extra demand they saw during the Aspen closure on the Eagle County Airport. Looks like Michael Miracle has his hand up. There we
This
go.
may be more minutia-oriented question, but there was an era where we had a advertising control, where there was an era where the airport was controlled by somebody who was able to get control of almost all the advertising, where it seemed like one entity had control of everything. And there has been some diversity since then, but is there going to be anybody in control of making sure there's diversity among each sector, that not one entity can control all of real estate, or so that there's diversity? Is there going to be a person that's going to be in charge of that?
There won't be necessarily a person that'll be in charge of that in the future, but what we're doing is we're just holding our contracts kind of steady right now until we get to a new terminal. Then we're going to reevaluate everything at that point. So yes, you will see some more diversification definitely with the new terminal.
Hey, Dan. Transportation on the ballot here this March. Could you talk to the room a little bit about the big modes grant that the Pickens County got to look at $2 million to look at the airport as a potential catalyst for a transportation system?
Sure. So we did receive a $2 million grant with a $500,000 local match. So for planning for intermodal facility. It's seen as the airport is probably the ideal gateway for that, because that's where the mix of transportation modes, rental cars, parking, aircraft, all of that sort of transpire. Plus that's where a lot of the, I'm fortunate enough to work at the airport, so I get to see the taillights as I approach work, but I get to turn off. So that may be an ideal spot for an intermodal facility right there. So we will be going into, as Michael mentioned, a $2.5 million planning process for an intermodal facility, and looking at all the interconnectivity, all the different modes, and this would be interconnectivity between the airport area and Aspen, Snowmass Village, down Valley a little bit. Yep. Sure.
Great.
Okay,
Thank you.
I know we love uphilling here, but it kills me when you're uphilling to TSA pre-check, check-in with a stroller and a car seat and the kids. So that would be my only feedback. Don't make us go uphill to check in to TSA. Thank you. I'll now bring up Maria Tixai. She is our Public Affairs Committee Chair, and she will be sharing with you results of our 2025 policy survey from the membership.
Thank you, Sarah. I appreciate it. My name's Maria Tixai. I am the chair of the Public Affairs Committee at ACRA. What do? We do advocacy. Advocacy is not politics, it's advocacy. We listen to what your needs are, we hear from you, we hear what you need, and we ask for it. There's a lot of ways that we do this. It might be as simple as, hey, Tori, tell people the bridge is safe. Tell them it's safe, and tell them you're going to keep it safe, right? It's as simple as that. Sometimes it's as simple as that conversation and having a listening ear on the other end. Sometimes it's education. So for example, you heard about our GrassRoots program. It's an election season. The PA committee loves an election season, and we have some great programs out there. I encourage you to get online and review. We've interviewed the candidates. We have a program on Referendum 1 and a program on Referendum 2. Educate yourselves. Vote smart. Don't vote out of fear. And vote. So please get on and take a look at the educational resources we have. We try to gather information, real information for you on our website, so to make it easier for you to make an educated vote. So please, get out and vote. There's not a lot of us, but use your voice. The surveys that we do with you are a critical tool for us to advocate for your needs. We need to know what you need, what you want, how things are going for you, and where to devote our attention. So I appreciate the fact that we had so much response to, oops, here we go. We've had great results and great turnouts to our surveys. I think we have a really vocal and really knowledgeable membership, and we appreciate the fact that you're speaking out and telling us what you need. We had a lot of open-ended questions there, and I read the answers. I read all of them over and over again, and I appreciate you all taking the time to tell us how you're feeling about things and what your ideas are, and we're going to act on them. The insights we gathered from our 222 members are going to guide our advocacy program over the next year and strategic planning in 2025. Oh, look, I went too fast. All right, so we have this interactive thing today, this Slido. Everyone grab their phones. I want to see how it's working here. The question that I want to ask you is, at your workplace, does the 6-inch rule apply? No, no, no. What are we? Are we a ski town or not? Boo. All right. So it's working, and I appreciate the feedback. All right. One of the things we were so happy about in this survey was the allocation between business owners and employees. This is something that we've been focused on for a few years here, is to make sure that the employees had a voice too. We don't want to just hear from the owners, we wanted to hear from everyone. And here are the results to show that we got a very nice turnout from employees and the leadership, and that really helps us know that we are representing all of you. Here was the response rate for our response, and our confidence level is high that we heard from you and that we're going to be able to represent your positions to the powers that be and people who need to hear what you want and need. I'm not naive. I know that one of the reasons you guys responded is because ACRA gives good swag when you respond to these surveys. And the reason I agreed to do this in the morning when I'm not a morning person is because of the gift bag on my chair. So like free stuff, well, you'll keep getting free stuff. For this survey, we gave away a food and wine pass. And the winner of that food and wine pass was someone who also probably was very vocal in her responses. The winner of the food and wine pass for responding to the survey was Angie Wang, who is not here, but I am confident that food and wine pass is not going to be wasted. So, top business concerns. This is a graph showing what the top business concerns were when we polled both employees and employers. And there's no real surprise here about that lack of affordable housing was number one and commute time was number two. No one's gonna be surprised by that, but here are the numbers. Staff shortages and retention of employees, which are related concepts, came in at 3 and 4. These issues are reaching a bit of a fever pitch, I would say. One of the things you see here is that the lack of affordable housing, a whopping 81% of respondents identified lack of affordable housing as a critical workforce challenge. That number is up from 73% in 2024. That is a huge jump in only 1 year. Will it be 90% next year? I mean, how high will that go? The other one that we want to focus on then also is we know that transportation and affordable housing are constantly on our radar and things that we're constantly talking about for you. But workforce retention. We have to be able to keep employees. We have to do something about that. The challenges are increasing. You heard at the state that workforce issues are also important. So staff shortages and workforce retention. We know that affordable housing is one of the problems that we face as business people in keeping workforce. For many years, the availability of great jobs down valley and mid valley is really hurting our ability to retain workforce. And of course, the commute. We all know that we've lost employees because they'd just rather not sit in the traffic. The other thing we have to think about is competitive benefits packages. I know this is hard in inflationary environment, high prices, but competitive business packages are some of the issues that we heard about why we are having workforce retention challenges. There were some insights on affordable housing. You know, there's always the fundamental, and we almost don't even need to say it, but I will. We need more. We need more close to town, and so let's just say that's the baseline. We heard that from all of you over and over again. But maybe the thing that surprised me the most was how much the membership was begging for us to pursue more diverse options, right? We know that APJA is something that our community should be proud of. It's like nothing else in the country. I get calls from people in Telluride all the time. How do you do it? What is it about? And we have this great fundamental baseline program. But people were really asking for more diverse options and looking for our options outside the program. And there was an understanding that one size doesn't fit all necessarily, and that the qualifications of the program sometimes can be limiting and can make it difficult for us to bring employees or new recruits or people who are living mid-valley into the program. So there was definitely a lot of comments that I read about adding something new. It doesn't have to be an APJA. We need more rentals. Consider more density. Consider smaller housing. And we need incentives for business owners to help with the affordable housing issue. We've been talking for years about private-public partnerships and businesses' desire to help contribute to the solutions on affordable housing. And yet, we're still sort of working on the solutions. So what we heard there was just think outside the box, right? Come up with something new. All of our solutions are not necessarily an APJA. One of the things that I saw in the comments that I was curious about was just this question. It raised a question for me. And so I'm wondering, for those of you who live in APJA housing, do you think it's affordable? Because I thought I had some doubts about that. All right, that's good, right? Well, all right. Give a little time. I just thought it would be interesting to find out. Okay, thanks for everyone. Here are some of the comments that we heard about diversity of housing options. There are a lot of ideas there and a lot of very specific issues about qualifications and what people would like to see. They want a mix of seasonal, family and dormitory style housing, more rental, high density, no car. I know that we are sometimes by some people regarded as gas-guzzling employees that want to get in our single occupancy vehicles and ride up 82. But we aren't necessarily. We'd like to have housing options with no cars. No cars is the wave of the future, and we're transitioning there. So people are really willing to have that. Here are some more quotes. There was a lot of comments about businesses being given the opportunity to participate in programs to help with the affordable housing. On that note, we asked a specific question. We asked, this was a big surprise to us, and the question was, are you interested in living in employer-owned housing? And the answer was 61% of the respondents said they would. There are the usual comments, and I think these are, again, fundamentals, which is that employer-owned housing isn't for everyone. Some people don't want to be beholden to their employer, and there's a negativity associated with that idea. But we have a very large program that's designed around that concept and protects people for whom that would not be a good fit. But there were a lot of great comments from employers about how they used it for recruiting, and they provided housing and allowed someone to live in it for 2 years, and then they went off and worked someplace else. It's a great product for mid-level managers. There were comments that business owners should be allowed to buy into some of these programs and some of these housing complexes and then rent to their employees, and that there's a space for it. So there's not this general aversion to business-owned housing. 61% of the people thought, sure, more is better, and if they can help contribute to the solution, let's find a way to do that. So let's find a way to do that. Oh, here are some of the comments, and all of you people on City Council in Pitkin County and APJA and all the new people, you'll be getting emails from me. But these are all actionable items, and these were great ideas that you generated for us. I had a question. How many businesses in the room would be interested in, would get involved in the development of a program that helps assist with buying housing to rent to their own employees? Cool. Let's do the Slido. You wanna, if you're on it? But I mean, I'm old school. I love raising hands. So. Obviously, if this is to be an action item, cost is an issue, right? The businesses cannot afford to do this on their own anymore. And so I know that there are people there who talk about pursuing these businesses, this public-private partnerships, and I'd like to get that going. Another issue that came up was just the knowledge that we can manage our current housing assets better, right? Let's be realistic, we always can, right? There were lots of comments about looking at the qualifications and making it more accessible for employees, and we're gonna pass those comments on. This year, APJA is doing strategic planning, and we will let you be heard on that and make sure that your ideas are heard. And we look forward to seeing what kind of revolution we can have in that program to make it more usable and to better use those assets. There's also just really a keen knowledge amongst the workforce about fraud and that there's housing there to be had. And so I was curious, this is often a very sensitive subject, right? The question is raised about, look, would candidates are they really committed to managing that asset, to managing the housing assets, and are they committed to enforcing housing rules in order to make it available? I think there's always just a question about whether there's a tension in terms of whether or not the people who represent you are willing to enforce APJA housing rules to your benefit. So I'm curious, and if you could Slido this, would you vote for a candidate that committed to enforcing APJA rules, yes or no? Really? Well, there you go. That's the answer, huh? I mean, leadership. We all want leadership, and let's not be afraid. That is, asset management is a fundamental that we're asking for out of our leaders. So, all right then. All right, so let's move on to transportation. Everyone's favorite topic, including mine. Transportation insights. Again, there's stuff that I don't even have to say. There's traffic congestion. Travel times are killing your employees. And it's making it hard for you to retain a workforce. We are very lucky in this valley to have RAFTA. And so again, two of our greatest assets are our affordable housing program and RAFTA. RAFTA is the number one largest rural transportation agency in the country, and its ridership numbers are in the millions every year. We should be so grateful for what we have with RAFTA and so proud of ourselves for getting on the bus. The other thing that I saw in the responses that I was really proud of was how multimodal we all are. People are walking to work and riding the bikes, and they want more bikes, and they want more access to it. And like I said, it becomes really easy when you look at traffic and you're frustrated to think that all of our commuters are just gas-guzzling single-occupancy vehicles and Cadillacs, just, hey, fix the problem. But we're really not. We are really like the model for the country, and I'm very proud of the responses I heard and what you asked for. And so I defend you, and I will continue to defend you on that front. You know, one of the key components, it's not rocket science, to reducing congestion is to put more people and less vehicles, right? More people, less vehicles, more people on the bus, right? That is just, let's not overthink it, right? So we did ask you some questions about what you needed and what would it take to get more of you on the bus, even though we're doing great. So here are some transportation insights. What would encourage you to use different commuting methods? One of them was improved public transportation access. I don't want to take away from RAFTA's presentation. We forwarded the survey results and all of your comments to RAFTA, and Kurt's going to address that. I hope he'll take a moment to brag about the great job they're doing and the same business challenges they have regarding retaining workforce. But one of the things we need is improved access. If we can get more access, and if we can work on this problem, our people are saying more people will get on the bus. So let's focus on getting more people in fewer cars. Another thing that rated really high was employer-provided subsidies and financial incentives. I thought that was very interesting. We do have a bus pass program, and we were going to talk about that in a minute. But those are really, really actionable items, right? That is one of the higher items that's keeping people from getting on the bus, and it's very actionable. This is a town where we are spoiled with riches in some regards, and there is money, and let's devote some resources to what people need, which is financial incentives to get on the bus. The other one that ranked relatively high, and that's in our control, is flexible work hours. You know, thanks to COVID, people are learning how to be able to not get on the road at the same time. But it's clear we can do better on that. And so that's something that we as employers can work on, and it is something that maybe the powers that be can help us with. So I want to hear more from the room. So if there was a bus stop or a bike station closer to you, would that encourage you not to use your car? Okay, great. These are really actionable items and executable items, then I'm happy to have people here in the room to hear that. If there were more frequent buses, would you ride RAFTA more often? Okay, frequency is an issue. And would you ride the bus to work more if the buses were less full? All right, so people want to get on buses more. Let's work on that, and I look forward to hearing from Kurt. One of the things that was on there was financial incentives and subsidies. As you may or may not know, ACRA does have a bus pass program, and here are chamber prices and non-chamber prices for the bus passes. We would love to find a way to work together for this to be something that helps people get on the bus more. And we wanted to ask the question of what financial incentives would get you to increase your bus use. I think this is it multiple choice, Sarah, or is it they just get to say whatever they want, keep it clean? Yeah, so clearly we need to look more at this, more at the pricing, more at the utilization of that, and encourage businesses to purchase bus passes for the employees, sorry. Next, I want to turn to top business owner concerns. A lot of this was a combination of the owners and the employees, but one of the things that we heard a lot of was city permitting, that the city permitting process is really cumbersome. A 4-month delay by a business that is a seasonable business is almost a death sentence, right? And so we heard it over and over again, and we look forward to working with the city to try to improve this process. There were discussions about having business liaisons and lots of other ideas here and actionable items, and we will pass them on. This is, I think, something that the city has said, at least in terms of building permits, that maybe it wants to work on, but we have to do it. It's really, really hurting business and really hurting our constituents. The last thing that I want to talk about is a bit of a reality check and maybe a bit sobering, and that is when we asked just the business owners what their business challenges were, the answer was a little different than the whole, and the cost of doing business was the highest. It ranked higher than affordable housing, and it ranked higher than transportation as its #1 problem. The cost of doing business in this town is astronomical. In a rich town, we have rich aspirations, and these things cost money, and the environment is a very difficult place to run a business. We say we love our local businesses. I do, ACRA does, and we need to give them a little more love, right? Because we don't want them to go away. We talk all the time about the places that we've lost, and we need to really be talking about it. We talk so much about numbers 2 and 3, so much about transportation and affordable housing. Why aren't we talking more about the struggles of business? Because that is what keeps all of us employed, and that what keeps us all here enjoying the way of life that we have. We need to talk about it more. I think that one of the most challenging and rewarding times that I've ever had as the chair of the Public Affairs Committee was during COVID. And what I loved during COVID, and you might not have known this, is that behind the scenes, your business leaders and the owners were working so hard in tandem with City Council and with Pitkin County, trying to figure out how to increase revenues and just stay alive, right? We were up all night. We were up early morning. We were on Zoom, right? A lot of good things came out of COVID, including Zoom. And, you know, I can remember in particular a call with Ann Mullins, who was helping one of the sectors try to get back to work. And there were a lot of business owners there, and we worked so hard for you. And there were 2 business owners on the verge of tears because, you know, there was talk about, taking care of one another and, making sourdough starters, right? Do you remember those? And one of the business owners said, "Do not talk to me about sourdough starters. I have 15 employees that have mortgages and rent, right? I don't need sourdough starters. I need revenue. I need to figure out how to get back to work." What was great about that period from an advocacy standpoint was how much people collaborated and listened to one another. And we had sort of this ugly advantage during COVID that nobody knew what to do, right? We were like, what is this? Is this really happening? And so we had to listen to one another. And we had to get on the phone and say, what do you need? How can I increase your revenue? What are the standards that you can follow? Which are the ones you can't? How can I get you back to work? And our voices were heard. They were heard early. And we as a community got back to work a lot earlier than other communities, and I was so proud of us. If there's one thing that we could carry over from COVID, I wish it was that, and I think I think we should get back on track to that. There are things that policymakers don't know about how you people do business and about what you need and how hard it is for you. And that's what I do for you, and that's what my committee does for you, and that's what we do for you. And I hope we can ramp up these very early listening conversations so that we can keep this a place where businesses can really, really thrive and that we can all enjoy this wonderful place called Aspen. So, are there any questions for me? No? Okay, thanks.
Next, we will bring Kurt Ravenschlag, the CEO of RAFTA. We did prep Kurt on the content of that previous presentation, so he is not being put in the hot seat. But thank you for joining us today, Kurt.
Good morning. Noticing when they took my headshot, I had grown a mustache, and then I shaved it off. Nobody knew who I was, so I had to grow it back. So, Kurt Ravenschlag. I'm the new CEO of the Roaring Fork Transportation Authority. I stepped into that role September of 2024. Prior to that, I was the Chief Operating Officer for RAFTA for 7 years, almost 7 years. Before that, I came from the Front Range, mixture of private sector consulting in transportation and managing a public transportation system up in northern Colorado for about 10 years. So one thing I wanted to touch on, I kind of feel like throwing my presentation out after looking at the survey results here, because there's a lot of stuff I'd love to chat with you about. But one thing that I do want to share is, and Maria touched on this, that we are really in a unique environment here, and we're so fortunate to have a public transportation system that this community has built over the last 30 to 40 years. It's really unheard of to have a public transportation system operating in a rural environment like this. It's an urban level system in a rural setting. And that's really what made RAFTA so attractive to me, because I could come live in the mountains and still operate an urban level transit system. So it's also of note that, and we've had a lot of questions about this in the last few months, or actually last month, with a lot of the changes that are coming out of Washington around federal funding, and concerns of how that might impact RAFTA in terms of the services we provide. What's really unique about RAFTA is, from an operations and maintenance standpoint, about 1% of our operating budget comes from federal grants. Most transit systems across the country are more in the 25 to 50%. So we're so fortunate, and that has to do with the community. The community has said, we want to prioritize alternative modes of transportation. We want to prioritize public transportation and not cars. We want the environment, the communities we live in, to remain a setting and have the essence that they did when folks first moved here. So that's been a commitment that these communities of this Roaring Fork Valley and even the Colorado River valleys has made, and it's really special, and it's unique in the United States. And that, I give credit to those who came before us, who had that foresight to develop and invest in systems like this. the fact that RAFTA owns a 40-mile rail corridor is really unheard of for public transportation systems. So we have a lot going for us. Even though we have challenges in front of us right now, we do have a lot of opportunity as well. So with that, I will jump into my presentation and talk a little bit about what has been going on with RAFTA for the last several years. So we got hit hard by the pandemic, like many businesses, as well as public transportation systems. If I had a 2019 chart on this slide, you would see that that was the year that we hit our high water mark for passenger boardings and trips. It was about 5.5 million passenger boardings. Pandemic hit in 2020 and we dropped down to 2.6 million. We've been slowly crawling out of that hole. One of our biggest challenges has been that our staffing levels dropped during that time in 2020, and it's been really hard to climb back out and bring the workforce, bring our bus operators back over the last several years. So I thank you and appreciate the patience everyone has had for crowded buses and standing room only. I rode up this morning and we hit standing room only at Elgibel. So it's a challenge. We're back. This is the first winter season that we've been able to provide our full complement of services since 2019. We're fragile still, though, so we don't have a lot of buffer. So there are times where you'll see we might have to make some cancellations today if some folks call out sick. But this year, in 2024, we finally reached 5 million. We just were 5,034,000, I believe. So, and this is something, even though it has taken us 3-4 years to get back to the levels that we were in 2019, most transit systems across the country are not seeing the rebound that we've seen. A lot of people are still working from home. A lot of people have chosen other modes to get to work. They've gotten back in their cars. But we are in this unique region where that's not always an option, right? We don't necessarily have the transportation infrastructure to just support everybody getting in their cars and driving where they want to go. So public transportation is really critical to this region. RAFTA does have other services that we provide besides the big fixed route buses. We provide paratransit service to individuals with disabilities that can't access our fixed route services. So we provide that in the Aspen area, Carbondale, Glenwood Springs, and in unincorporated areas of Garfield County. In 24, we provided over 15,000 passenger trips. As mentioned, we also are stewards of the Rio Grande corridor, which is a rail corridor that's in a rail banked status. It's being currently used as a recreational commuting trail, and that is from Glenwood Springs to Aspen. That is being preserved for future mass transit options, which is again an opportunity for this region. And in 2024, we had over 290,000 trail users. We've also been very fortunate in our pursuit of federal grants to provide the infrastructure that RAFTA is going to need for the next 20 to 30 years of serving this region. An area of high growth that we're anticipating is coming out of the Colorado River Valley. We know that that is an area where there's more affordable housing. People are getting pushed further and further down valley and to the west along the Colorado River Valley. So we're preparing for being able to meet those future demands, as well as being able to continue to meet the future challenges of the upper valley and mid valleys. So in 2024, we did receive about 48 million in grants. Some of that is in question still, as many who receive federal grant funding, those will likely be reviewed to ensure that they align with the new administration's priorities. We're hopeful and optimistic that we'll still receive those funds. I will say, though, that 15 million for new buses, those were state funds, and those are secure. So we're good with those funds. Some other things of note, RAFTA did complete its first climate action plan ever in 2024, and we then promptly received a Climate Champion Award from the Federal Transit Administration for being proactive and progressive in identifying climate action strategies. As mentioned, another note is I'm here now in this role, standing on stage, which it's of note because RAFTA has never had a leadership change in 36 years. So for those who know Dan Blankenship, he had an amazing career, 36 years at RAFTA, and really is the architect. The architect of what we have today. So in addition to our climate action plan, we also developed a zero emission vehicle transition plan. It's a mouthful, but it's an action out of our climate action plan to transition our fleet to zero emission. During our planning work for our climate action plan, we identified that our buses are our single largest emitter of greenhouse gas emissions. So that's where we can make the most advances in reducing our greenhouse gas emissions, is transitioning our fleet to zero emission. We currently have 8 all-electric buses that primarily operate in the Upper Valley. We're in the process of ordering 10 more with that $15 million we received, and we'll likely receive those probably in 2026. We're evaluating our plan right now to getting to zero emission as a combination of all electric and hydrogen buses. And for those who are not familiar with hydrogen, it's still an electric bus. It's an electric motor, but the batteries are charged by the hydrogen that's on board through a fuel cell versus charging off the grid. So they're still electric buses. I think I just touched on that slide there. Oh, I will go back. Some of you here have probably noticed our overhead en route charger there at Ruby Park. You can see it in that lower right image. That is also part of our strategy for transitioning to zero emission. One of our challenges with all electric buses is just the range. Like any all electric vehicle, we need a bus to do about 250 miles per day. We get about 125 miles out of our all-electric buses currently. So this charger will allow those buses to top off while they're in service and hopefully be able to reach that 250-mile range. We also, back in 2022, I want to say, RAFTA initiated a new program with first and last mile mobility. First and last mile mobility, for those who may not know, it's just how do you get to a bus? You know, not everybody lives right next to a bus stop, as well as when you get off your bus, how do you get to your final destination that might not be right next to the bus stop? So those are in the forms of WeCycle, microtransit, other opportunities to help people get to and from their destinations. We started a grant program where we were working with our member jurisdictions to provide seed funding to kickstart these types of first and last mile mobility solutions. So in 2024, we issued over $760,000 in grant funds to our member jurisdictions to help with first and last mile mobility. So Basalt, that was our first grant that we awarded back in 2022, and that was for the Basalt Connect. So we're providing 50% of the funding for that service. It's a microtransit on-demand service in Basalt. Carbondale just launched the microtransit solution as well. I believe they call it the Downtowner, just like Aspen. And we're providing 50% of the funding for 3 years for that service as well. We also initiated a partnership with WeCycle. So as many of you all know WeCycle. I don't know if Amirta's here today or not, but she did just a fabulous job building that program as a nonprofit for many, many years. But in 2023, I want to say, we went into a joint partnership with WeCycle to where now RAFTA is helping provide the funding to expand that program, and I'll touch on that here in the next slide. But in 2024, you can see there's over 250,000 rides on WeCycle. And RAFTA is committed to further expanding these first and last mile mobility solutions in the region. And it's a priority of our board of directors as well, which I know I have a few of my bosses in the room too. So back to that WeCycle partnership. Prior to the partnership, WeCycle, total stations, they had about 54. They had about 91,000 rides in 2022. After that partnership with RAFTA and our MOU, we've been able to significantly increase and expand the access to first and last mile mobility, bike sharing opportunities. So we're not only continuing to expand in the Upper Valley and Pickens County, Eagle County, Mid-Valley, but we just launched a full bike share system in Carbondale. We're planning a bike share system in Glenwood Springs this year with a launch in 2026. But as you can see, rides have increased by over 184%, and the availability of stations has increased by over 64%. So this is a partnership that RAFTA sees as an opportunity of how we can further expand access to RAFTA services. We've also been busy with various infrastructure projects. We just opened this last fall in 2024, the 27th Street underpass. This is one of our initiatives that came out of the Destination 2040 ballot initiative in 2018 that provided a $2.65 mil levy to RAFTA to help build and facilitate infrastructure and new transit options in the Roaring Fork Valley. So this is at 27th Street in Glenwood Springs. This is an underpass of Highway 82 and 27th Street that provides connections to the 27th Street station. It also provides a number of improvements to the intersection there in terms of its phasing. This was about a $22 million project that RAFTA completed in about a year and a half to 2 years. So if you haven't been down there, check it out. It's a great new facility. It will connect to a new park and ride that will be constructed on the northwest quadrant of that intersection that will add about 200 more parking spaces in Glenwood Springs. We're also busy just building the foundation for the RAFTA for the next 20, 30 years. So in Glenwood Springs, we've decided that's the new headquarters of RAFTA. We've strategically made those decisions to shift where our workforce is located, just knowing the challenges of having to come to the Upper Valley. Historically, over time, Aspen and our Aspen maintenance facility was kind of the headquarters. That was the mothership for RAFTA. But knowing that most of our workforce lives in the Colorado River Valley, we've really been thoughtful in shifting where that location is, more down valley and West Glenwood Springs, to not only accommodate our existing workforce, but knowing our future workforce is likely going to be located down there too. So we just wrapped up completion on a close to 70,000 square foot facility there in West Glenwood Springs. It provides a indoor storage for 60 buses, and being able to park indoors is really critical for the buses that we're buying, particularly all electric buses with the batteries and being able to preserve their useful life. So that facility just opened in December. We also have a new operations center where we're able to bring a lot of our staff together at RAFTA. Again, this is one of our Destination 2040 projects. Maintaining our trail is also a priority. We've had a number of trail projects this summer. We repaved about 3,900 linear feet of trail, as well as we repaired the Roaring Fork Bridge there just outside of Carbondale. It had some foundation issues that we went in and shored up and ensure that those are safe. We do bridge inspections every year to make sure that those are all safe for our users. Housing. Funny story. So the image up here is a hotel conversion that RAFTA has been engaged in for the last about year to 2 years. This was the Roadway Inn previously in Glenwood Springs, just on Highway 6, about 42 units. And we purchased this and have spent the last year and a half renovating it into single unit studio studio units for our workforce with kitchenettes, and they're really nice units. I know a lot about this right now because I'm preparing to testify at a hearing with the Department of Revenue, because we're not allowed our sales tax exemption on this project because the Department of Revenue did not feel that housing was within the purview of RAFTA. And we're trying to explain to the Department of Revenue that every employer in the Roaring Fork Valley is housing is now in our purview. It's something that is absolutely required for us to be able to provide the workforce, to provide the services to this region. So this is a great new amenity for us. It opens, I believe, next week. Our first tenant moves in. It's 42 new units that will be controlled by RAFTA. Housing, historically, RAFTA has had a number of leased properties in the Upper Valley. And in April, we lose most of those units to go to the music school and other entities in the Upper Valley. And then it's musical chairs, us trying to find new locations for those folks to live, which is disruptive. It's hard for our employees to really become part of a community. So this will allow us to have more permanent and stable housing for RAFTA. We currently have about, this will get us to about 117 beds that we have for our workforce. So with that, just wanted to end on a note of kind of tying it back into the survey results. RAFTA is at a stage right now where we really are looking, we've done a great job getting to this point and building a public transportation system, but we also recognize that the work is not done. There's a lot more to do to continue to meet the needs of the current challenges that we have, as well as the challenges that we're going to have for the next 20 to 30 years. And we hear the issues. We know about access to RAFTA. We know that there are barriers that we have to figure out how we can reduce, whether it's the accessibility to bus stops, having adequate park and ride capacity, whether it's fares, whether it's the frequency of service. Those are things that are on our radar, and we're going to be working towards solutions and hopefully working towards those solutions quickly. We're going to be evaluating our system. We're going to be looking to see where there are efficiencies that can be gained, where we can make sure that we have our buses at the right places at the right times of day, so we don't have too many resources at times where you have empty buses driving, and then during peak times we have people standing on buses. So we're going to be doing a lot of efficiency reviews and working with all of you, the business community, as well as our member jurisdictions to continue to meet the needs of this region as we have for the last 40 years. So I think there's a question and answer at the end. I'll be happy to engage in that. So thanks, Sarah. Mm-hmm.
What?
We have a little over 400 employees.
Thank you. Great. Thank you. We'll hold any further questions till the end, just so we can. We're tracking to go a little over 10 o'clock, so I know some folks may have to get up and head to their next engagement. So thanks for sticking with us. But I'll welcome up William Small to the stage now. He is president and founder of Zenith Realty Advisors.
We all ready to jump into the exciting world of commercial real estate in Aspen? So obviously the commercial real estate here in Aspen is a very expensive part of doing business in Aspen. If you were a tenant looking for space right now, being at retail or office, this is kind of what you'd be faced for. If you're looking in the retail area, if you were lucky enough to find something kind of on the outer rim of the core, you might be able to find retail space for about $100 a foot. As you move into the center of the core and the prime spaces, that quickly jumps up. In the last 12 months, we've had leases in that 350 range. A bulk of the spaces are going to be running 250 up to 300, but that's kind of what you're faced with if you're a retail tenant. If you're an office tenant, you could maybe find some space in the $50 a square foot net range, and now we've been seeing some leases up as high as $120 a square foot. add on anywhere from $25 to in the low to mid 30s for real estate taxes and CAM fees that will actually normally get passed on to the tenants. So West Main Street, a little bit of more of a bargain. You're looking at rents probably in the 45 to 50. And out at the ABC, you're looking at rents that are probably now in the around 45. Vacancy rates. Well, the reality is there's virtually no vacancy. I kind of did a survey of the rents that are the spaces that are quote for lease. Many of them have tenants in them, and they won't become available for 6 months to 12 months. So we're looking at maybe something in a retail around 5,400 square feet, office in the core maybe 7,800 square feet. A third of that 7,800 square feet is one kind of building. There's a typo on the slide. It's actually, we have roughly about 1 million square feet of commercial space in Aspen, not a billion, but. So the overall vacancy rate is really right around 1%. When you compare that to normal markets around the country, that's a hugely, very, very tight market. So where have we come in the last 5 years? It's hard to believe that 5 years ago we were in the middle of the COVID crisis. It's really at that point in 2020 that we kind of saw a big, huge spike in rents and real estate prices and so forth. But if we went back and looked at 2019, we were looking at retail rents in the core that were in the 50 to 225, 230 a square foot. Office rents were pretty much available in the 40 to 65. West Main Street, 25 to 35 would have gotten you an office space. ABC was really in the low to mid 20s. So we've seen an average appreciation in the last 5 years of roughly 13% annualized. And that compares, I did a study a few years ago, went back like 30, 40 years, talked to some of the landlords that have been around forever, looked at their spaces and buildings and what they were getting back then and what they're getting, they were getting like 5 years ago. And I estimated that the annual appreciation for commercial rents over the long term, we're talking 30, 40 years, was roughly about 7.5% a year. So we've seen a huge, kind of almost a doubling in the last 5 years. So what's the reasons? Well, we're all familiar with the post-COVID migration. Much, even a wealthier demographic reflected in the huge increase in residential prices moved into Aspen. We've seen more national, international retailers that are kind of following the money. This is where many of their clients either vacation or live now. We have a small commercial core, roughly 30 blocks, that's surrounded by some of the most expensive residential real estate in the world. So it's like a perfect storm for increasing commercial rents. But interestingly enough, even though we think these rents are pretty high, when these national, international tenants come and look at Aspen and say, okay, 250, 300, 350 a square foot, then you see what they're paying in other cities and resorts around the world, like in Milan, Italy, in their primary retail core, 2,000 a foot. New York City, 2,000 a foot. London, 1,700. Hong Kong, 1,400. Paris, 1,480. Tokyo, 1,200. Vienna in Austria, 800 a square foot. So, and you look at places like Saint-Tropez and Monaco, and you see the same kind of pattern. So from a national, international point of view, Aspen looks like somewhat of a bargain for retailers. And that's also true in office space, because I used to work in Washington, D.C. The kind of rents we're seeing here in Aspen, it was 25 years ago, you'd saw that in Washington, D.C. So what we're also, in terms of trends we're seeing, the ongoing trend of national and international retailers is continuing. So I've identified about 20 retailers that are new to this market, or there's a few of them that are actually had moved to larger spaces, like Gucci moved across the street to a better, nicer space, Dior expansions. So this gives you an idea, and there's probably a couple I've missed, but it's a pretty, in the last 12 months or so, that's a pretty good representation of still the increasing desire of these tenants to be here. Let's see. So I think I skipped a slide here by accident. Okay. The other trend we're seeing is restaurant groups opening up multiple locations in Aspen. That's something relatively new that's happened only in the last 3 to 5 years. Obviously, we're familiar with the local CP restaurant group. They now have 6 locations and a 7th coming with the Red Onion. Clark's La Montaña has 2 locations and further potential restaurant locations in the Mountain Chalet redevelopment. Infinite Hospitality currently has 3 locations and 2 more that are on their way. We have 3 locations controlled, Aquilina, Angelo's, Diamante under one ownership. Matsuichu is opening a new location at 500 East Durant. We've probably all seen that project going up for the last year or so. St. Ambrose just opened their 2nd location. Hillstone, White House Tavern, they're opening a 2nd location. And then Catch Steak is just a national restaurant group that's been here for a couple of years. So what's happening in the restaurant area? In the past 12 months, we've had 10 new restaurants open up. 1 is almost open, but you're probably familiar with some of these. Wayan, the Indonesian restaurant that's new. Zigzag that took over Mezzaluna. Aosta that's across from the Monarch. Heisei, which is a Japanese restaurant, which is under construction, but likely to open before the summer. San Ambrose with their new space on the former Main Street Bakery. Boto, where the Wild Fig used to be, and the Wild Fig moved to just next door. Stranahan's, Buck, and Jimoto, a new ramen restaurant, which by the way is pretty good. I've been frequented the last few days. New hotels. Well, the Molly, which has been open now for about a year, 68 rooms. The White Elephant, which is coming along, expected to open later this year, 54 new rooms. The HR Guest House is going to be another 20 rooms, likely to open sometime in 2026. That project is currently on hold for the moment, waiting for a permit. And then the Lift 1 project. So as I understand it, they've just filed, both those hotels, probably collectively about 150 rooms, just filed for their building permits. That process, I understand, is going to probably take about 18 months. Likely groundbreaking is going to be sometime probably at the end of 2026 into 2027. Likely completion in 2029 or later. Commercial property sales, there's not been a lot to report there in downtown. The old Aspen City space in 201 North Mill Street was bought this summer, has been converted into 4 smaller, really high-end office suites. We had 4 commercial condo spaces that sold in the range of $1.1 million to about $3.5 million. Most recently, just 2 or 3 weeks ago, we had the sale of the old Pitkin County Library on Main Street, just sold for $8.2 million. The biggest transaction was kind of the forced sale of the Aspen Holdings commercial properties, 4 buildings that sold to Mark Hunt for $62 million. So where are we with some of these projects downtown? The RH Gallery and Restaurant space, well, that's on hold. And this was mentioned earlier about permits. You talk to all these developers and they say they're just waiting for the city to grant a permit on something that needed to be changed. And so it's some of these projects have set, it's like without any work being on for months, waiting for the city to grant a permit. My own thought on that is that when these buildings and projects are just sitting there, not only are they an eyesore, but the loss of revenues to the city from sales tax and everything else just adds up. And then the cost of the developers just pushes up these development costs, which eventually get passed on to the commercial tenants. The Jazz Music Center is going, and that's likely to be done by the second half of this year. This is part of the same project, the Red Onion Restaurant. That's kind of scheduled to be completed by sometime late 2025 this year. It's hard sometimes to say when these projects are going to be done because they run into a snag. They need to change their permits, their approval. They have to go back to the city. That can delay it for 3, 6, 9 months. So these completion dates keep moving back. This is a smaller project. This is the old City of Aspen space that was at 201 North Mill that was taken over and now been converted to 4 office suites. So, predictions. I have a couple of quotes here from Yogi Berra. I think it's very appropriate. It's difficult to make predictions, especially about the future. I think that's it's always true. I think this other one, which is more, I think, appropriate for Aspen, the future ain't what it used to be. So, things are changing in Aspen. We all have our opinions of whether we like the changes or not, but there's clearly the Aspen of today and what it's likely to be tomorrow is going to be somewhat different than the Aspen of 10, 20 years ago and longer. So what, right now I would say that if I had to predict the next 12 months or 24 months, if the economy of the United States and everything continues and the stock market continues strong, keep in mind that Aspen operates on discretionary income. We are very dependent upon wealthy people that have extra money to buy homes, tourists that come to Aspen to spend what is getting to be a big number for a family of 4 to come to Aspen Snowmass for a week. This is all discretionary income. No one needs to come here, no one needs to buy a second or third home here. So it's very much dependent on discretionary income. And as we saw back in 2008, 9, 10, 11, when that dries up, it can have a pretty big impact on our town. Back then, commercial real estate rents dropped by 30, 35%. Vacancy rate went up to about 10%. Arguably, for a period of time, although no one sold, the actual values of commercial real estate in Aspen probably dropped 40% when you looked at the relation to cap rates and interest rates. So what potential black swans might be on the horizon that could upset our apple cart here? I think the biggie one is the economy. Right now, we've had a great stretch for the last, I'd say probably since COVID. And if it continues, that's great. The stock market's pretty close to record highs, unemployment close to record lows. Is anything going to happen? One of the things that I kind of think about, watching the current economic news and what's happening is, these tariffs that we're now talking about imposing on our trading partners. Is it a negotiating tool to get something else that we're not really sure what else we're trying to get? But I went back and did some research on what was the last time and what was the impact of trade tariffs. So I'm going to just kind of read you a little bit here. The last major trade war occurred during the 1930s following the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act of 1930 in the United States. So the United States placed tariffs on 20,000 imported goods to protect our farmers and industries during the Great Depression. And this was just at the beginning. However, the result of this was pretty devastating to the U.S. economy and global economy. Retaliatory tariffs, other countries, Canada, Britain, France, Germany, imposed their own tariffs in response, leading to a rapid decline in international trade. Global trade collapsed by 60% between 1929 and 1934. Worsening the Great Depression and the economic downturn. Unemployment surged from 8% in 1930 to 25% in 1933. Political tensions, the trade wars deepened recessions in many countries and ultimately led to this global instability that led to World War II. the policy was reversed in 1934 when they finally realized that this was not working. In 1944, they passed the reciprocal trade agreements, which marked the beginning of modern trade liberalization. And the question is, are we seeing that kind of unraveling right now? So, that's one. It's been about 16, 17 years since we've had a recession. Recessions usually come about every 7.5, 8 years on average. So you kind of wonder if something is about to break. The other thing that I think is kind of a chilling thought, but something that could have is wildfires. When we see sections of a major city like LA with the size of Manhattan is wiped out, you have to kind of wonder, how vulnerable are we to that kind of thing, being surrounded by forests here. I know Rick Ballantyne, our police chief, fire chief, has written an article recently about, are we at risk? And potentially, I think we are. And everybody that owns a home or condo or business and owns commercial real estate, your interest rates have gone up pretty dramatically in the last couple of years. And then you look at towns like Lahaina that got resort town just got wiped out. You got to step back and think, how vulnerable are we to something like this? But I don't want to end on a negative note. So it seems the theme now is that Aspen is heaven, your ticket to heaven. My sense of things is that, that even if we do have an economic downturn, we recovered pretty quickly from it back in 2008, 9, 10, probably faster than anybody else. So Aspen is still a fabulous place to live and visit. So as long as that's the case, we all still have, it's one of the favorite places of wealthy people from around the world. So as long as that stays in place, and the patterns we see historically here in Aspen over the last 20, 30, 40 years, even though we've had downturns, we've come back pretty quickly. So getting back to commercial real estate, I think that commercial real estate, particularly if you're an owner, this is one of the best places you could own commercial real estate in the world. The economy here seems to support the rents that people are having to pay. So I think, except for the potential black swans, which I think are pretty minor probability, I think that we can continue to see our commercial real estate market stay pretty strong and vibrant, and the economy as well. So, does anybody have any questions? Yep. All right, thanks.
All right, now we will bring up Jen Uten, Senior Projects Manager for the City of Aspen.
I'm going to be very brief. I'm a senior project manager in the city manager's office, and I am a project manager for a couple of projects that I think you might be interested in. I'm going to go very quickly, given the time. Obviously, we've talked about this a little bit today. There's growing housing need and increasing cost in our valley and in the Roaring Fork Valley, but also in the Colorado River Valley. And so I'm not going to go further into this slide. There are a number of things that the City of Aspen is working on in the housing realm. One of the things that we're working on is a housing needs assessment, which will make us more eligible for some flexibility and some state funding. And then there's also a state law component that we're going to comply with that came out of the legislative session last year. That is, we mentioned earlier about the need for good data, and this project will help us have better data about what the needs are in terms of housing in our region. We're also working on a Forest Service project. We're excited to talk about the reauthorization of a program that allows the Forest Service to use underutilized administrative land for community benefit. So since late 2021, the City of Aspen, Aspen Valley Hospital, Roaring Fork Transportation Authority, the Aspen School District, and Pitkin County have been working on this project to potentially redevelop 806 West Hallam. It was a program that was initially introduced as part of the 2018 Farm Bill, and it just was reauthorized. The Explore Act, or the I won't go through all of this stuff, but basically it reauthorizes the use of this property until 2028, and then there were some other things that we need concessions in the law to make it more reasonable for us to be able to pursue a redevelopment of this property. So really, I want to say thank you to the anchor institutions that have been part of that, especially CMC, who has been a main partner in helping us kind of navigate this. So we're looking forward to advancing this project. I said I was going to go quickly. One of the other projects that you know that we've been working on is the lumberyard project. The demolition of the lumberyard property that's 11 acres near the airport business center is underway, so that demolition is happening. The infrastructure piece is going to start this spring. And then we've been working with, we had an RFP process to talk to vertical developers for that property. We're very close to making an announcement of who that negotiation will happen with for that vertical development. So this is something that's happening. It's we're really excited to see this because it's a big project. It's one of the densest projects, or the densest project that will happen in affordable housing in this region. So we're really excited about that. What else is going on? We have an election that's happening. Early voting is started. I'm told that the most important message here is to say that you need to either mail your ballot and have it be received by Election Day, or drop it off at City Hall, not in the box that's near Pitkin County's offices. So early voting is happening already at City Hall. And if you have questions about that, I'm happy to talk after. Like I say, I know that we're short for time, so I'm just going to be very quick. The other thing that's happening today is there's some APSHA meetings to kind of take feedback on affordable housing. So there's one of those happened last night. There's one that's happening today. Would, again, love to talk more about that. Or Carolyn, you can stop and talk after with Carolyn about that. But we would love to have your feedback for APSHA as they are developing their next strategic plan for the next several years. All right, the Highway 82 West Aspen Transportation Needs Study, otherwise known as the Entrance to Aspen. I'm the project manager on this project. The city is kicking off an effort to kind of a pre-NEPA process, so before that environmental process. We will be asking for comments from commuters and visitors and residents regarding transportation needs. We are working on a development of a justification. It's a project scope for a new federal process. So City Council will review whether we want to ask CDOT and FHWA for permission to open a new environmental process later this year, so in the summer. We will be opening that public engagement piece that is kind of the work that needs to happen to make the case to CDOT and FHWA right after the election. So we paused to give the election room to happen, and then immediately after that, we are going to open that opportunity up. We also will be meeting with anchor institutions and stakeholders to talk to experts about their needs related to this corridor. So it's the 3 miles essentially from the airport into downtown Aspen. I think I said everything on this slide. We'll be looking for comments about multimodal transportation needs, safety and environmental concerns, wildlife, traffic insights, transit, all those sorts of things. That's it. Yeah. It's one of my skills.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us this morning, sticking with us. Are there any questions from the room for any of our presenters today? Microphone behind you, Leslie.
For RAFTA, I applaud RAFTA. It's such an amazing service in our valley, so thank you. Quick question on the downtowner. Can you explain briefly why it can't serve Hunter Creek? I think there's an agreement, or there was a...
Well, and I think that would actually fall to the city of Aspen, correct? Does the city manage the downtowner contract here in town? So Leslie's asking about the footprint that the downtowner can service and why Hunter Creek is excluded.
There will be an update to the transportation study that's happening that's related to parking and also to transit needs. And I think it's March 10th that there's a work session with City Council, so stay tuned for that.
Great, thanks, Sarah. And a question for Kurt. Thanks so much, big RAFTA fan. There's a lot of obviously discussion and confusion about the various proposals for the entrance to Aspen and how they affect traffic and how transit can be improved or not improved. And as part of the Public Affairs Committee and a resident that's very concerned, I'd like to hear what RAFTA's take is on the various options, how it'll either help or hinder their efforts, if it'll increase capacity, and is there a formal plan or a position that RAFTA is. We're listening to a lot of information from Jacobs Engineering about how it could help, transportation, but I haven't heard that same commitment from RAFTA itself, and I think it'd be very helpful to the community to hear that from the one entity that is so involved in this.
Yes, it's a hot topic. So RAFTA's historical position, knowing that the entrance to into Aspen, the Castle Creek Bridge, is part of a record of decision from 1998. There was a preferred alternative that was identified, which includes the straight shot through Meralt to connect into Main Street. That is the scenario that RAFTA supports. That's the official alternative that was identified through that process. If and when the NEPA process, I'll look to Jen, who may know more about that, but if that NEPA process is reopened to evaluate new alternatives, such as ones that might be being discussed by Jacobs and others, RAFTA will definitely engage in that process and provide feedback on those potential alternatives. In short, RAFTA's position is to support the option that prioritizes transit most, right? That is really what makes RAFTA effective, where RAFTA can be a competitive option to an automobile. Anytime, if you're prioritizing automobiles, you're going to get more automobiles, right? If you're prioritizing transit, you're going to likely get just as many people with less cars. So that's RAFTA's position, is that we're going to support the option that best prioritizes transit to allow us to move people in and out of Aspen. Is that a political response to you? All right.
Thank you. I think a gentleman right here, Julie, right here.
Another question for RAFTA. As you look at the fall off and the return of ridership, I'm aware that in many communities the fall off in ridership has been directly related to employment and where people are working. I'm guessing that that's not so much the case in the Roaring Fork Valley. So as you have seen ridership return, has the impediment to increasing ridership been passengers or not working in the valley, at the upper end of the valley, or has it been a constraint on essentially your employment and your ability to provide services?
I think it's multiple factors. I think the dynamic of the Upper Valley and the Roaring Fork Valley changed after the pandemic. We got folks that left the area. We got new folks that came in. We had, probably a reduction in the availability of rentals in the Upper Valley. It just really changed the dynamic. A lot of folks were able to work from home. We got a lot of new people moving to the Valley that have the ability to work anywhere and work from home. So Aspen ridership in the town of Aspen has probably been slower to recover than the rest of the RAFTA system. We think that's just kind of a change of the makeup of the Aspen community, and maybe those that just have other options available if they don't want to get on a bus. So I think it's it's also the availability of service. Like I said, this winter was the first time we've been able to provide our full complement of service to the communities. So I think going forward, the reality is this region is just so dependent on getting a lot of service workers to their jobs. And just the nature of the economy of this region requires people to be at their jobs. So I think we're going to continue to see ridership grow. It might not be the same riders as it was back in 2019, 2020, but the need to get people to a place of work, I think, is going to continue. There's going to be people, though, that have other options. They can work from home. Maybe our ridership would have been greater if this sort of world pandemic didn't happen. But I think there's still going to be that demand, and it's going to continue to grow. So.
Don't sit down. Anyone else? Any other questions? Oh, yes. Julie, or Taylor's there. I'll get them this way. All right. Emily, here you go. Okay, Maureen next. Who?
Oh, okay, perfect. I'm sorry, it's back to you again, RAFTA. I apologize. The question I had is in the breakdown of some of your information. I definitely respect the full Valley corridor transportation. Could you speak a little bit to the localized use of the RAFTA services? Have those numbers increased or decreased? And when I'm speaking localized, I'm thinking some of your free servicings, and not just your skier shuttles, but I'd also like for you to speak to that too, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think in general, as I alluded, the Aspen local services have not come back at the same pace as our regional services. So there's a lot of factors, again, that drive that. It could be in the winter. Our peak season's winter. That's when the most people are here. That's when we're running our skier shuttles. A lot of times our ridership can be tied to snow levels, right? Whether people are coming to Aspen to ski. We've seen that impact. Now I will say Aspen ridership is growing. It's still coming back. It's not stagnant. But it's growing at a slower rate than the rest of the system. So I think, as I mentioned earlier, is we're at a point in time where it's time for a fresh look at the services we're providing. I know Jen alluded to the transportation plan that the city's doing. We do have some services that are not performing to our expectations. And I think there's a better use of those resources in areas that'll have a better impact on productivity, getting access to bus service. So I think we're at a point where it's partly just the change in the dynamics of the community since the pandemic, but there's also just been changes in where people live and where they need access to. That I think we have the ability to work with the city of Aspen, Picken County in some cases for some of their services, to see if we can reallocate resources to be more productive and better meet the needs of this Upper Valley region.
Can I ask one follow-up? Do you keep track of any of the demographics, the youth versus through senior utilization of the services as well?
We do through an onboard survey. In some cases, we can do that through fares, but in the Upper Valley, it's zero fare, so we're unable to really collect demographics. But we do a onboard survey every 3 years. We're scheduled to do one this March. So we're going to get a lot more new information in terms of the demographics of our users. Mm-hmm.
Hi, also for RAFTA. Has there been a study as to how ridership ridership could be improved if it was free to Rifle, Glenwood, whatever. Obviously, it's a big cost. And secondly, allowing dogs, since they're allowed on the New York subway, it seems like we should be able to have them on the Aspen Roaring Fork Valley buses.
Yes. So part of our climate action plan work was looking at one way where we can, without doing really anything different, where we can reduce our greenhouse gas emissions is just get more people using the existing services. As many of you know, our peak periods are pretty much at capacity, but we have a lot of capacity in our off-peak periods. So I know, I guess Tori's not here anymore, but Tori asks me regularly about how we can implement free fares. So this year we've got a project planned where we're going to start looking at maybe creating some fare-free periods and off-peak times, hopefully encouraging for those who might have flexible schedules to travel at a different time. They could take advantage of those free periods to be able to get to and from their locations. So we recognize that fares are a potential barrier to people using our services. So for context, I don't know if our CFO is still in the room. He probably won't like me sharing this, but our fares represent about 7% of our operating budget. So it's nothing to sneeze at. It's about $5 million. But that's something that I think RAFTA and our board of directors will be looking at to see what would be the impacts of reducing fares or even eliminating fares in some cases to be able to provide more access to RAFTA services.
Thank you, everyone, for being here. If we could do, thank you so much. Any follow-up question, any additional questions, please send those to membership@aspenchamber.org. Great turnout, great discussion this morning. Thank you so much. Thank you to our presenters and to the whole community for turning out this morning. Thank you.